And here we are. Hello, everyone. Hello, Sean. Hello, Eugene. Hello, Rob. Hello, Joey. Thanks all for doing that with someone who doesn't even speak English properly. So,
Well, your English is better than my French. I don't know about anybody else here. So
Same.
yeah,
You're just gonna steal my line?
I rented it from you.
Okay, I'll take that.
so we're here doing this video thanks to Sean who suggested we do that, and thanks to all of you taking the time to do this. So I'll quickly introduce you all, and then maybe you'll introduce yourself the way you want to be introduced, or introduce the other ones. Maybe that's even funnier. But so Sean, Rob, and Joey share a band together that has been kind of dormant for a little while, and that is right now about to release their very first long player under the name of Birth Defects, which a project that had a very long history and complicated and interesting one. And Eugene here, who I personally saw live 30 years ago in Paris a few times. I think it was in Paris, yeah, with a band that is currently not active, but that is beloved by many, Oxbow. Even if you had a band before that, that was kind of the founding ground of what you did for a long time, and now you are embarking in a new, somewhat new project with three Italian
No,
co-conspirators.
two Italians and now a Frenchman.
All right.
David Hemery is on bass now. So David Hemery.
All right. Well, we'll have all time. We'll have about 40 minutes to correct me and my mistakes. So that's perfect. And but essentially, this started with the fact that I was helping out a little bit on the side in the shadows, Sean and Rob with the upcoming album, which is a fantastic story. I don't know if we're going to focus too much in details about that. We obviously are going to talk about it, but as we have you, Eugene, with us right now, why the hell, Sean, did you think it was a good idea to do the promotion of Birth Defects with someone who is, I guess, a huge influence and figure
Yeah, I mean that
for you?
that kind of answers the question. I mean, we kind of share some similar people that we know, and punk obviously is a small circle anyway, so it's everybody's kind of 2 or 3 degrees away from each other. But I mean, Eugene has been such a huge influence on me. I remember hearing Oxbow for the first time, probably when I was 18. Mm-hmm. And I think that was Let Me Be a Woman was the first Oxbow record I heard. And what was really, at that particular point in time, I was really getting into stuff like Flipper and Note, really kind of just this really sort of spacious, almost music. You know what I mean? And Oxbow was like, once I'd heard that record, and then I think after that it was probably King of the Jews. Maybe I heard after that. There was just a lot of space in those records, and I was also really getting into, like, as pretentious as it was, like John Cage, and it just all sort of made sense. And then when I started to read about Eugene and kind of just who he was as a person, just my respect for you, Eugene, was just, I was in awe, just like reading about the stories and the way that you would write. I mean, your writing was also kind of the other sort of doorway for me. So, but I really appreciated the tension that Oxbow really brought. You know what I mean? And again, at that particular point in time, I was just into that sort of vibe, for lack of a better way of putting it. So, long story short is Eugene was doing a sort of kind of not book reading, but just a book tour. And I was in the small corner in the Red Room in Black Hat, and I kind of raised my hand like the Punisher that I was, and was like, "Hey, Eugene, I heard, Oxbow just kind of broke up. Can you, comment on that? And you were so gracious. And then afterwards, we kind of spoke a little bit about my sort of work in MMA, like adaptive MMA. I have a disability. And that's the other thing that I think I emailed Eugene on maybe a year or two ago, was just, like, you're such a big influence on me. And he was part of the reason why I got into MMA when I was probably 19, 20. So anyways, that's a long-winded way of saying, Eugene, you're great. That's why you're here. That's why we want.
Yeah, that was a fun reading, kind of a process of redemption in regards to DC for me. Since I've got this fraught relationship with my father, who's a DC native, so it was always weird for me to go there. But that was a good show, and I appreciated talking to you then. So, and what I appreciated even more about the record was that there's a weird thing that happens when you fall under the shadow of post-punk, and that includes all of us. And that I think Albini was such a massive kind of seminal influence that he touched stuff that he didn't even touch. And I find that bands that are influenced by there are two paths that they go down, and one of the paths I find much less interesting, and that's they imitate sort of his vocal attack, which is this kind of sardonic thing, and it works for one guy. But when you hear two or three bands like that, and I've had friends in bands like that, and they're great bands, but I just have to kind of remove the vocals from the equation to enjoy them, because it sounds like an Albini piss take. But what the bands that are influenced by him that I really like are the ones who go, yeah, that's great, but we are going to kind of step a little bit beyond that, or outside of that, or beyond, behind that, or we're not going to do that. And I was pleasantly surprised when I heard the record, which I've listened to several times at this point, that it was, that we were all children of electrical, but at the same time, some of us just did a better job of being our own people through that. So it was super exciting. Which is to say again, which is why I agreed to do this, because I really did enjoy the record. And if you know me well enough, if I did enjoy it, I would have written you back and said, I'm not digging this, man, but good luck to you.
At this point, I think it's fair to kind of just remind for the people who are watching who don't know, Birth Defect, the band Sean, Rob, and Joey represent right now, which is currently a quintet, I think, or a sextet.
Quintet, yeah.
Quintet,
yeah.
Wait,
no, it is a sextet. Yeah, it is. Yeah. Keep hearing there's 6 people now.
Who is the 6th person that you just forgot?
It's probably me.
No, but so the band is called Birth Defect, and obviously, as Sean just disclosed, even if it's not obvious here right now, Sean has a disability. Sean has been a disability advocate for rock venues for how long? For a long time, right, Sean? You were an activist.
Yeah, I mean, I without going like too deep into it, there was about 10 years ago, I was really frustrated. There was a hardcore band I wanted to see, and we all know with DIY venues that it's they're not built for kind of normal consumption. And I was really frustrated. And one day I was like, I can't go to this show. And I just got really pissed off. And I was like, I'm just going to make a document of every venue that I know of and just document their accessibility. And it kind of snowballed from there. So for a while, I was doing a website that kind of documented that. And it was really just for me. And I would document if there were stairs. I use a walker to walk. So I'm pretty mobile. I have cerebral palsy, but I'm pretty lucky in the fact that I can get around with the walker and all of that. But so anyways, that was kind of the idea in terms of me being a sort of advocate. But I have, obviously with cerebral palsy, you're born with it. So you live, I've lived with it for 42 years. I'll live with it for another however long. Maybe tomorrow will be the last day. Who knows?
Well,
I have to get a hologram for tour then.
The struggle is incredibly real. I just got off a tour with Boonwell, and I have surgery tomorrow because I've got a ruptured quadricep tendon. But I'm like, I've never canceled a show or a tour. I'm not going to start now. So I just duct taped my leg, my knee, and tried to move side to side versus front to back, which kills. But, you know, this in our contract, it was stated that hotels have to be on the first floor, or in the ground floor in European terms. And I'm not going up and down fucking stairs. I can't do it. And pretty much, you know, about 80% of the people paid attention to that. And then the other 20% had to do things like carry me or, you know, get me. I was like,
I know how that is.
Can you get up these stairs? I'm like, nope, because I'm not going to get hurt worse because you didn't read the contract, you know? No.
So I guess what we're talking about brings probably two of the main topics that you guys have in common, which is, well, obviously everything is political, but in this case, you were also talking about Steve Albini, and in my mind, you have your own take on that, but you both are kind of at two different ends of the Steve Albini spectrum. And for me, Steve Albini, it starts with Big Black. So basically, the idea of noise. Obviously, noise is political, and noise is or could be the great equalizer. You both approach the music from a perspective of great physicality, but very different ones. Like when you listen to Eugene's current project, well, to describe it quickly, you could say it's a mixture of post-punk, metal, industrial, avant-garde, and poetry, whereas Birth Defects is more like punk rock, straight up punk rock with noise rock, and a sort of lo-fi quality to the approach. So you could say these two things are different, but they both are grounded in noise. And I don't know what you guys think about this idea that noise is sociologically and politically the great equalizer.
Great. Well, I mean, equalizer in what sense?
In the sense that it levels the plane. We're all equal when it comes to noise.
When it shows who has autism and who does not.
Right. I don't know about equal. I largely feel that I'm a lot better than everybody else. I don't. I think
that's the competitive side of you.
Right. Well, maybe what you're saying is that noise has a way of inviting in many. So, but that was, you got to realize I've been doing this long enough so that I remember when people started describing it as noise. In fact, I wrote an article for, I think, Ray Gun magazine. So this had to be the 90s about Japanese noise rock. And that's, of course, somebody else had called it that. And I remember Mason Jones, who had ran a record label that brought over Yamatsuka Ai and the Boredoms and so on. And I asked him about that. He goes, all music is noise. And I was like, and that stuck with me. That stuck with me. It doesn't occur in nature. We are creating it. It's artifice to a certain degree. But I like the nomenclature because it really doesn't rule out. I mean, I've always had problems of people doing a record and people expecting that record again and then being disappointed when we did a subsequent record. Whereas when you use the overriding term, the rubric of noise, then it's, there's no expectation there that I feel shackled by. So,
but I guess there is also a way, a very odd way to belong, in the sense like when you go to the ultimate pop music that just is about eliminating noise. When you start making music, there is a lot of noise. You create noise by accident, and you guys chose to keep it, to have it part of the DNA of your sound and music. And in that sense, I think that is a way to tell people, to tell the listeners, we're together in this.
Well, I think like we, Rob and I, when we started Birth Defects, which was at this point, 12 years ago, Rob, something like that, 13?
Yeah, something like that.
Noise was like the number one thing for us. You know what I mean? And I'll let Rob sort of go off on this. But I'll just say that I remember when Rob and I were kind of figuring out what we wanted this band to be, that was one of the, if we had a theoretical list, that was like in the top 3 things, and not as a texture thing or as like, oh, that would be cool if we have a lot of feedback over here. You know what I mean? There was noise to us, to Rob and I, to Joey, is extremely important because it isn't just a texture thing. It's a part of the art that we do. It's a color that isn't just there in the background. But I'll let Rob kind of go off on this.
Yeah, sure. Like, I guess when I approach music, I like bands, I like artists who approach it more naturally, I suppose.
Mm-hmm.
And noise is a part of that process when you make recordings. Mistakes are interesting to me. I don't like to hear everything like perfectly in repetition. So like, and this connects to Albini, like natural recordings, recording a band, how they sound live, it to me is more important than trying to like create an artificial sound through studio equipment. And so I've always approached writing that way. And whatever kind of happens when we're playing our instruments together, it can be magic. I mean, it's happened in the studio. We've done takes where I'm like, well, that's never going to happen again. So that's going on the record just because it sounded really cool. And that's kind of in the DNA of the band. And like, I never thought about it as a genre, right? Like noise is just another tool in the arsenal. It's another thing I can draw from. When I was writing songs for Birth Defects, I wasn't thinking about like fitting it into an archetype or a genre or anything. It was just like, does this sound good right now? And if some noisy stuff works with what we're doing, then I wanted to include that. So I can kind of see what you're saying earlier with it being like the great equalizer. It does, and what Eugene had said, it allows more people in. People who don't have a professional music background or like classical training, approaching music through noise can be a way for more people to find unique sounds, experiment with instruments, make them do things they weren't designed to do, and you can create whole new sounds that way. And you can create a unique sound for yourself and stand out. Like, you don't want to sound like all the other bands. That gets pretty boring. I want to create something that doesn't sound like anything else. And it's not just like the whole band, but it's like song to song. I don't want the songs to sound alike. Like, if 2 songs sound too similar, one's going to get cut, or I'm going to have to change like drastically one of them, because it's just like, I'll get bored. It has to like constantly change, and noise allows you to do that.
Well, and the answer that you got is very telling, that, you know, 2 of you have actual instruments in the background. You realize I haven't played an instrument. I mean, I started with violin, and then banjo, and then saxophone, bass, keyboards, but I've never pursued any well enough so that I identify as a musician, right? I mean, you know, usually they come to me with the songs, or I'll suggest songs, but my purview has to do with lyrics and vocals. So my understanding of noise is like, you know, somebody describes my vocal style as noise based, I get kind of irked because I'm actually trying to sing.
You know, it's interesting though also because so the noise, I guess when Sean and Rob were trying to describe noise as not just a color, not just one tool in the arsenal, it's also because noise is psychedelic. So I think, but you, Eugene, you managed to, you say you're a singer and lyricist, but you're also a performer, and you bring great physicality to the music, which is another dimension of psychedelic, the psychedelic nature of music that is rarely there. Like when you see, for example, Henry Rollins in the late 90s, it's not really psychedelic. It is very physical, but I think you maybe managed to open the door or the window to something that is as well psychedelic, probably because there's also this sort of controlled chaos through noise in a lot of your music.
Well, and that's where I was thinking it lets people in. I remember having a discussion with Biafra, and I was at a crossroads. I think Muru Muru, which we just remixed and is coming out this fall. second Whipping Boy record. The first Whipping Boy record was hardcore. Muru Muru was very definitely not. And I remember being shocked that it wasn't well received. And then Albini kind of frameworked it for us. He said, if you go to a store and you ask for toilet paper and they give you sandpaper, you're going to be pretty annoyed when you get home. So I was like, there's got to be some sort of truthful advertising. I thought people would embrace it, but I remember telling Biafra in this, dark night of the soul I was having, like, why do people like this? I love this. And I said, what I'm trying to do is capture the sounds in my head. And as an ambassador of that, then you have to say, okay, I don't know what he's going to turn out musically, but I trust him enough to go on this journey with him. And I don't think I'd earned that trust at that point. And Biafra goes, well, that's what we're all trying to do. But, I've listened to some of those latter day Dead Kennedy records, and I would say if that's the music in your head, then you need to think harder. My goal consistently has been to really get the music in my head. And I guess noise has come closest to being able to do that. And it gives me, a really beautiful kind of place, like a lyrical framework for me to work with. So yeah, I'm enjoying it. And I find myself still steadily attracted to that sound.
There's a physicality too. And this is why I want to bring Joey is kind of relatively new to Birth Defects.
Sean, that's exactly why I wanted to also ask Joey, since you privately described him as the noisemaker in Birth Defects.
Yeah, so I got brought on. You know what? All right, I'll do the origin story first, then we'll talk about noise theory. So origin, met Rob at a show, recognized shirt of a certain band I was wearing, who I'm not allowed to talk about. And he was like, oh, that's cool. So we exchanged contact info, kept in touch. And I ended up doing a show with this band, bringing them to New York with my band, Bloated Subhumans. And Rob went, Sean went, Matt was there too, right? I think a bunch of the members of
Matt Bowie. I don't. Was he there?
I think Matt was there.
Maybe. I mean, it's a show that all of our circle was sort of at. It's very important.
And then, I think he was there. Yeah, I think he was. Yeah.
Yeah. So he saw me there, and then I ended up somehow like a month later. I really don't know it was like a crazy series of events. I ended up bringing Drunks with Guns to Baltimore, and played that show. And they were Rob's other band. I guess you're inactive now. Ugly Twin played that. And after that, Sean had approached me and asked, like, hey, we were in this band, and we would like to have you, come in and add some stuff to our record that we're, thinking about putting out. So I was like, yeah, sure. That could be fun. So we scheduled a day. I put together a setup, which was like a Moog. I've got a bunch of like weird homemade synths that I bought some from someone in Pittsburgh that are really cool. And also like a hacksaw and some sheet metal, and just ripped through everything in one take. They played me the songs. I put headphones on and we just knocked them all out. And then later they're like, hey, we're going to do shows because Chris X wants us to do shows. I was like, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Because they wanted to do shows as well. Let's give them some credit.
See, Sean, when he approached me, he's like, it's a contract. He really wants us to do it to promote the record. I'm like, yo, dude, if I get to fucking like smash sheet metal in front of people, I'm not gonna say no to that. It sounds great. But then I kind of like turns out I was not on the like right dose of like psych meds that I take, and towards the end of last year I like went fucking insane and had these like, I don't know, thoughts that they had like mixed me out of the record, or they were like, I don't know, intentionally like shelving any ideas that I had or something like that. So I quit, and then I upped my meds and was like, oh, oops. So I apologized to Sean, and Rob, I apologize to you, right? If I didn't,
yeah.
Okay, good. All right.
We did now.
Yeah. So, and then I was like, Yeah, sorry about that. And they brought me back in, and it's been a lot of fun. I think that the live unit is far superior to the record. Like I like the record, but I think that the live unit is something different because of all of the, I guess, different personalities and ways that we're playing like the instruments. Like, so with doing the noise, I'm not just doing, I'm not just slamming on a Moog and twiddling knobs and whatever and making the harshest sounds I can. I'm trying to work it into the songs intentionally. So a lot of it is very percussive. I follow the riff specifically. I do things in between, in parts of the progression to like fill out space. So it's not just about, being as harsh as possible, right? I'm not Masami Akita here, right? I'm doing something much more, I guess, more akin to like SPK, right? Where it's musical. And then in terms of noise theory and like my history with noise, I have always felt that art should be challenging. I don't think, like, for me, I understand the appeal of of bubblegum pop. I understand the appeal of even stuff like Italo Disco. I think I kind of enjoy just because it's so saccharine that like it becomes like this weird, like, just disgusting kind of like it's just a product, right? And it's enjoyable for that aspect. But like some of the first punk I ever heard was Happy Flowers, was TSOL, was Big Black, and that stuff just like really. I remember the first time I heard Bad Penny, and I was like, "You can say that in a song? Like, you're allowed to say that? Like, that's crazy." First time hearing Happy Flowers, I was like, I could not like comprehend this band that were basically pretending to be 8-year-olds, like slamming instruments and like screaming at each other. Like, it just blew my mind. And so from there I kind of hardcore, and then got more into like noise rock and death rock and goth and post punk and then industrial and whatever. But I genuinely, I've always kind of felt that art should be challenging. I would not be a part of this band if they weren't doing something that I felt was challenging. Like, yes, the songs are catchy. They're very well composed, but like there is an edge to them that I think wouldn't be there if they didn't have their like emphasis and love of noise, of almost like, I guess, deconstructive whatever. I'm hungry, so I'm not the most eloquent right now.
But see, that's
like dinner time,
But with Eugene's new record too, and this is what I kind of was. It's funny that this is a good transition to talk about your new record, Eugene. It's every song, and Robin kind of mentioned this about our record, and I think it applies to your new record. Every song seems different. Yeah. Like it seems like a different journey with every song. Yeah. I mean, there's like total thrash songs in there, then there's total just like almost, again, weird spatial songs.
Yeah, I'm guessing you're talking about Mansitude, the new Buñuel record. I mean, what people didn't know, and I say people, including me in that people, I didn't realize the musical history of the people I was making music with. And I knew halfway through the very first tour that we had done together that something was going on, because, the guitar player would go out on stage, everybody goes, ah, they went crazy. Okay, well, I guess they're happy that we're here. The drummer goes out, people are screaming. The bass player goes out, people are screaming. And then I go out and people are like, eh? Who is this guy? So I'm like, oh, these guys are huge in Italy. And they've been huge for like 30 years, right? From a short, I'm speaking specifically of Jabi in A Short Apnea. And then he was in After Hours. I mean, these have been bands that are super significant, at least in Italy. The original founding bass player, Pier Paolo Capavia, was in One Dimensional Man, as well as Teatro del Ororio. So, I mean, I say that all to say that whatever comes out of Buñuel sessions is by no stretch of the imagination accidental. Not like just jamming, and hoping stuff comes. I mean, it was born in their heads, as a tribute or kind of an homage to, 90s noise rock. And that's how it came to me. That's how it struck my ear. But within that, there are all of these like, you know, tensions working their way through, from pop music to, you know, 60s biker film music to all of that kind of weird influence stuff that they're old enough to get their hands on, but still young enough to make it really happen. So it's exciting. It's exciting to not be dogged by your influences, but actually make use of them, you know.
You just used a word that I think exemplifies all this perfectly. Accidents.
Yeah.
Normally, we consider noise an accident in everyday life, and what Joey was saying, even though Joey was saying that SPK, blah blah, SPK. Sorry, I'm going to be the smartass. Depending on who you're talking with, some people might think that SPK is a dance pop band. So
try to forget.
Yeah, I'm with you there. But if you think about like most of the pop songs that stay, that have a lasting power, usually it is because there is an element of something. If it's not an accident, for example, a song like Emily by Lil Wayne, with this loop repeating, that is close to noise in a way. It becomes noise. Or if you take even more recently, Wet Ass Pussy by Cardi B, there is something very noisy about that. And I think that songs like that, or if you take like songs by Robert Palmer or Madonna in the 80s, you will find that as well in the songs that we remember. It's not necessarily the stuff that we want to listen to every day, but the stuff that stays. Like if we go back to Musique Concrète, to Pierre Schaeffer, when he does the music theory of the sonic object, by definition, everything but a musical instrument is essentially, it means again that all of this is very political, because as you were saying, Joy, you saw that band and you were like, oh, I didn't know it was allowed to do that. Just to provoke that reaction to you, that's the best way to do politics. Because Eugene, you have now this new project called Buñuel. We know who Buñuel is. He's not Italian, he's not American, but it's not a political slogan. It is a clue, because you can't tell people what to think or how to think. So you're giving them clues, and then comes the noise to realize.
I always think about it in terms of Hansel and Gretel and breadcrumbs, you know. So yeah, if you're, I mean, and that's the thing. I mean, that's if you have the ears to hear, and if you don't, you should still be able to enjoy it anyway. Which, you know, that's the goal with any kind of music. Otherwise, we would not play out, I don't think. Right? The idea is to get somebody from one place to another, and that other place is probably a little bit closer to where we are. All right.
Bumming them out.
Well, it's funny.
Get up on stage. I'm feeling bummed out. You're gonna feel bummed out.
That's right. There's a great line from that Black Flag song off of Damage, which has become like an ethos for me, which is like, I want to make you feel the way you make me feel.
But there's we were talking earlier about physicality, and Eugene, what's really interesting, and we had kind of alluded to this a bit earlier, is, you know, with birth defects, if we're talking about the disability, it's whenever I go up on stage and perform, that is, I'm putting my body at risk. I mean, we all kind of do, you know, to certain degrees.
Especially
but for me, it's
swinging a saw around.
Well, yeah, I could be hit by the saw, like, clearly. But no, there's a certain degree of, I could totally, the walker could break, I could fall, it could be, and in that moment, when you're kind of in that moment of fear, and this is kind of the, you know, you wrote that book, Fight, you know, many years ago. And one of the takeaways that I had gotten from it in general is that when you're in that moment of fear, at the absolute pinnacle of fear, then you just lose fear.
Yep.
There have been moments where I've like been on stage where I'm like, oh, I'm gonna fall, or I can't physically do this. And it's less about like, oh, I'm gonna keep moving forward. It's like a dare to myself, and you lose the fear. So I guess my question to you is, and obviously everything that you've done as a performer in terms of Oxbow, Whipping Boy, you know, even with this project, there's a physicality there. How do you sort of navigate that? Do you get that same sort of feeling at certain points when you perform live?
Fear, I don't get that so much anymore. I mean, you know, my lifelong addiction to kind of martial arts has helped me to mitigate actual real fear, in terms of the idea that somebody might do something to me, even though, you know, there are four of us on stage and, you know, maybe hundreds of, if we're lucky, hundreds of people in the audience. So you never know. And I never see bouncers anymore. So I don't know where the hell they've gone to. So, but in terms of, you know, performing, I mean, that's why I've tended to respond so negatively and so violently to interruptions in performing, because it feels to a certain degree like I'm doing the most dangerous thing in the world. And to have some dickhead in the audience think that in the midst of that, what makes the most amount of sense is to throw some ice at me. Yeah, you're going to get a super negative reaction out of me. Though I have to say, to the world's credit, this doesn't happen nearly as much these days, but it is a precarious situation. And I'm trying to answer the dictates of my soul. And that might sound kind of arch, but the reality of it is, if I'm in this liminal space where I'm still trying to care about what I'm doing, and you don't presumably return that, well, you can go get a refund. That's a smart way to do it. But the stupid way to do it is to interfere with the process, because you're going to get, you know, if I am afeared and I'm not flighting, right? You know, the flight, fight, then that there's that fight option, and you're going to probably get a bit of that. But no, at this point now, I am just trying to hear the voices in my head, have them come out of my mouth, and not fall off the stage. that's the simple three-step, and that's where I find myself these days. And I mean, I literally just got back like 3 days ago from the Buñuel shows, and in a way more so than ever, because of the thing with my leg. Every single night I felt like I was on the, you know, at the edge of the precipice, right? Like, you know, I'm standing up. At one point I had a leg up on the monitor, and I think I stepped into the audience, and I'm like, you know what? Right now it's a quadricep tendon tear. They're going to put a cadaver's tendon in there to fix it. I don't have a broken leg, but given the fact that I can't use this leg, it could, you know, it could be catastrophic. I could do something during the course of this show that puts me out for 18 months. And I'm fucking 62 years old. So 18 months now is a long musical life for me to be off the stage. So all of these things, mortality concerns, all of these things come into play and interfere in the process of being able to, you know, go from soul to head to mouth to mic. But in reality, I think I comported myself well on these shows. I expect to do the same in June when we tour the States. And it is an ever-present aspect of playing live, you know. And I mean, and I'm thinking about all this stuff. Like Curtis Mayfield was a big influence of mine, and you know how he went out. Somebody hadn't tightened the lights that night, and the lights fell 60 feet from the ceiling and you know, crippled him. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that could go wrong. A lot.
That makes me think of how the hell is David Yo still alive and performing on stage then? But
well,
You know,
but
when I saw him with
have you seen him
Pure
move?
talent.
Have you seen him move? Have you seen him move? I mean, all this stuff. These guys are not like, I remember talking to Ben from Dillinger Escape Plan, and he had just gotten back from a doctor's appointment. His doctor asked him, "Are you a stuntman?" His body, he's like 25 years younger than me, and his body is like destroyed. You know, this is, I mean, when you're not, you know, we're playing for keeps here. So Yao doesn't, I mean, you know, I've known him or known of him for now 30 years. So he moves differently to me than he did 30 years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, this takes a toll.
Yeah, 30 years ago when 30 years ago when he was pissing on me from the stage, he was hitting it. Now maybe I could stand a chance.
I saw Yao at the 40th Flipper Tour in Baltimore. So that was what, 2019? So it was like 6 years ago. He literally climbed up onto the balcony of Auto Bar, like and like climbed and like shimmied across it in order to harass my wife with the song that she didn't know the lyrics to because she's not a fan of Flipper. She just accompanied me to the show, and she was hanging out up in the balcony by herself. And he comes out there and he's putting the mic in her face, and she's like, and Joey was there, and I didn't know Joey then. And Joey tells me later that everybody thought it was hilarious. It's like a story that lives on.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's great. That's
Also,
great.
what's wild about that show is and talking about David Yao's condition, he kept forgetting the words. So he kept like leaning down to me, being like, "What's next?" Because like I know I fucking know all the words. Like I love it.
It could also
And for a couple of them, he just pulled me up on stage and gave me the mic, and I just fucking sang the song.
Like,
well, Frank Sinatra toward the end, had teleprompters, man. If you have a songbook that's over 60 songs long, it gets tough, and the way I did it with Oxbow was usually if I could hit that first line, all of the rest of the song fell into place. But if I missed that first line, I was done.
I know how that is.
And on this Boonwell tour, I'm in the middle of a song and I realize, oh shit, I'm singing the wrong song. Which is an improvement, because with Whipping Boy Days, I did that and I blamed the rest of the band. In actual fact, I was right. I did the correct song off the playlist, of the set list, but they played another song. I should have adjusted to them instead of calling them out on stage for it. But with the Boonwell thing, I just realized halfway through, I was like, shit. And I switched it up. But then the song that I was singing was a song that was immediately after. So I just disclosed. I told the audience, like, this is what happened. That's why the words will sound the same. And, people enjoyed that moment of candor,
I mean, it's funny though for you, Eugene, and I think for this record, for the Birth Defects record, when we were doing like the other set, we did a couple of 7 inches, a cassette, and a kind of like a lathe cut box set. Not that lyrics aren't important, but those songs, the lyrics I kind of would write at the last minute. This record is a very like personal record, and we haven't really, a lot of these songs we have done live in the past, but some of these we haven't, and we've refined them. And I think we're all more mature musicians now, and so we want to execute them well.
Yeah.
And what I find is I'm really kind of hard on myself now about getting the lyrics right. And what I think is really, why I love your work, Eugene, is the lyrics really on record, they really do matter. You know what I mean? Like I'm listening to them very intently, and as a vocalist and as a lyricist, that's, that is like my bread and butter. And so I guess my question to you is like, what do you do when you get the lyrics wrong? Do you just kind of wing it, or do you just go, well, that was just part of?
No, I mean, the thing is, I'm all the back, the backstop for me is always the recorded product. I mean, we print lyric sheets, you got the recorded product. When you go for live, what you're going for, the happy accidents. So, I mean, I start to get anxious about it. And then I remember the words of Manuel Liebskin, who is a guy who I'm in this project with out of Berlin, the project is called Mansion. And he said to me at one point, I was getting anxious about it because he used to be our tour manager before we started making music together. He was like, nobody knows what you say anyway. In Germany, he's probably 100% right. And then I realized, oh, this is pretty liberating. So I can do my version of Ella Fitzgerald, the noise version. If I forget a lyric, I remember in general what lyrics should be here. What was I trying to get to? And I did that with the song Drug Burn off of Mansitude. And I kind of, the first line is sunset on sunset, driving through the hills. And the third one, the engine's between my knees. And I started to stumble. Yeah. And then I remember this was born out of, all of my songs are born out of real concrete events or series of events. So that's always, so then I just went into, it hits a slow part and I went into, describing the scene behind the scene. And that, if we were like the Grateful Dead or something, the people would love this because it's a multi-level approach to vocals that they won't get.
But even though, like, two small things. Imagine, Eugene, you play.
I'm sorry, my wife is dancing naked right on the other side of the computer to remind me about the time. That's a pretty useful way to remind me. And she's got, I'm not lying, and she's got a cucumber.
I have one question.
I wasn't kidding. What's your question?
All right. In the write-up,
yes.
Why did you talk about Fugazi instead of No Trend? You're talking about Maryland bands.
Oh, you're talking about the write-up
Fugazi
Eugene did for
No
us.
Trend.
Yeah.
No Trend to me is the no-brainer.
Yeah. Well, you know, when I make decisions like that, usually if you want to know anything about me, it has to do with a deep-seated grievance or gripe I have, and you wouldn't. I don't have any grievance or gripe with the people in No Trend. That's not the issue. But the person who introduced me to No Trend, I have a grievance with. And I didn't want to, actually, as I was writing it, I didn't want to give her the flowers for that, you know.
What's the tea here?
I'm just
But you know,
a petty, bitter guy, you know.
Eugene,
Seriously, that's the only reason why I went with Fugazi over No Trend.
Fugazi, yeah. But if you imagine if you played a show in DC, and after the show someone comes up and say, Eugene, you fucked up the lyrics, I want my money back. First, can you imagine a scenario where that would actually happen? And secondly, if that happens, wouldn't you be happy to have that story to tell?
Oh, well, I would reach into my pocket, grab whatever cash I had and throw it in their face and go, good luck to you. I mean, after we played a show in Vienna last summer, Oxbow, one of our last few shows. And, you know, show's over, play the encore. I grab my clothes because I have no clothes on, and I'm rushing off to this elevator that takes me back to the dressing room. It was this old venue that actually had a Hitler room, weirdly enough. Actually built the room for Hitler and for when he would come there to see operas. It's the weirdest room at all. They don't make a big deal about it, but they whisper and they tell you that that's a Hitler room. But going into that room, even before I'd gotten there, it just felt weird to me. So, but in any case, I get to the elevator and the guy is saying, some guy goes, in Vienna, he's screaming at me, in Vienna, we want our experimental music experimental. And I just looked at him and I go, and I pressed the close button and went, like, how am I supposed to respond to that? Get your money back. Whatever, man. I get, it's not my issue. Your issue with me is not my issue. So, but anyway, listen, you guys, I gotta go.
Yeah, Eugene, thank you so much for this. Thank you for the kind words. It really means a lot to us as a band. I think I'm speaking for Joey and Rob here. You know, I know for me, I would not be doing vocals, especially the way that I do them without you. So I appreciate you.
That's really nice. That makes me feel good. That makes me feel good. Thank you for saying that. I appreciate that. All right.
All right, thank you, Eugene.
All right, you all. See you later.
Bye, Eugene. Thank you.
Bye.
And I think we'll continue for like 10 minutes or so.
Yeah,
we go a little longer.
Yeah. And talking about breadcrumbs earlier, like we mentioned Steve Albini a couple of times, and I guess the story will be out by now, and that I'll do the short version, and then we can talk about it a little bit. Like, it's interesting because, like, you were saying that this is a very personal record, and one aspect of how personal it is not just the music, but how it was born. But the funny thing is that it is so connected with Steve Albini because you were supposed to record it with him.
Mix the record.
But in the end, you didn't. So in a way, he's part of the story while not being part of the story.
Yeah. I mean, it is, like, I think,
but he actually is. Like, I mean,
the original intention of the record, if we're just all being honest with each other, and, Rob can attest to this too, is we were, this thing we started recording in 2017. The idea was to just record whatever output that, we had, and or material that we had, and then just kind of put out a record and tour, do the normal kind of I don't want to call it generic, but we just wanted to put something out. We had put out, 2 singles. We had kind of put out this, we did a demo, obviously, and then we had put out this sort of pretentious box set, but that
the
was
box
sort
set
of
was a stopgap. Let's be
yeah,
honest.
because we
It was
were
a stopgap because the record was supposed, like, we had recorded the record and we were going to mix it and everything, and the band fell apart like multiple times during this, like multiple times, where we had to replace members. And we're like, it's been a year since we put something out. We were putting out something every year. We're like, it's been a year. So we're like, all right, let's slap together some unreleased shit, some demos, and something off of the record. And that's why we had the lead single for Macross. So if you have the box set, you have an original mix and master of Macross that's not the same as what's on the record. It sounds very different on the record. We did that really as a stopgap.
But so people understand, Macross is a song. One
Yes,
of my
it's
favorites
a song on the record.
of the record, but yeah, and also I guess to give a little context as well. So Birth Defects is your musical project, but for the longest time, Sean, you were running also a label, parties, events. You were kind of like the black ducklings of a little scene there. So there's a history and with you in the scene, in the East Coast scene of noise, rock,
yeah, I mean,
etc.
the connection to all of us, all 3 of us, really is, I put out Rob, sort of one of his very, not first bands, but I've known Rob for almost 25 years, and I recorded a demo of his one of his bands and put that out and booked some shows. And Rob and I just kind of, we've always sort of, even if we had lost contact for a bit, I think we knew that we both had a lot of commonality in how we approach music. And Joey, without even knowing them at the time, Joey was a fan of, I had ran this label Fan Death, and we put out a bunch of bands, but I think the one band that Joey and I, we talk about a lot together is
Twin fucking Stumps.
Yeah, Twin Stumps. An unbelievable band that really sort of takes, speaking of, stuff that like Eugene has done, or referencing No Trend, or other bands that shall not be named. Like, I think they took those influences and did something completely different with them. So Joey had already, they had owned some of those records already. And so it is kind of funny how, I was saying earlier how punk really is a small circle. And in a weird way, I've, not that I always knew Joey, but Joey had owned these records for years. And in a weird way, that there's a connection there with, and then Rob meeting Joey at that show was just, that's how punk sort of works, and so we've all been involved in DIY underground culture in various ways, all 3 of us, everybody in Birth Defects,
But I guess that my point was that, especially for you, Sean, I wouldn't assume for Joey and Rob, but for all your activism, be it political, be it musical, etc., this record and this project and this record especially is a sort of bookend to it all.
Yeah, it's a very, I mean, like you were saying earlier, it's a very personal record, not just because of the Albini thing, and the sort of long and quick of that was, again, I had hinted that we had sort of started recording this in 2017. We did some stuff in 2018, and then we had broke up in July of 2019 because I was just, it just wasn't working out, relationship dynamics in the band. And nobody's really to blame. It just didn't work out. And I just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And I quit. And so Rob was like, well, if you quit, I don't know, why even do this? And so the record was sort of left dormant just because I just wanted to get away from music. I wanted, and you and I, all of you guys, I've talked about this before, but I just wanted to not know anything about like what was going on in the quote unquote scene or scenes, and just like consume music. And but Rob had always kind of dangled the idea of, oh, we should finish that record. And then I think 2021, 2022, I think after a long night of listening to records, I think I actually texted Rob at like 12 at night, and I was like, I think I'm ready, you know. And from there, we kind of was like, the next morning I woke up and I said, all right, we're gonna do this. I have some ideas on how we should do it, and Rob was gracious enough to entertain me to even listen to those ideas, and that's kind of how the Albini thing came up. You know, that was a pipe dream for us. I mean, I was telling Rob, I was like, we're gonna do this because I had already said to Rob, like, no matter what, this is the last thing that I want to do, and I'm like, if this is gonna be the last thing I ever do in music, I want to make it the dream record, you know. And so Albini was on that short list, and yeah, we had everything was set to go with Albini, and you know, unfortunately, you know what happened.
Yeah, Kurt Ballou was busy, so they couldn't go record with the Converge guy.
What's that?
That's a joke. I said Kurt Ballou from Converge was busy, so you know.
Oh yeah.
No, but
I know you're a big. I know we're all big metalcore fans, so.
Yeah,
but
right.
An interesting perspective is that, as you said it, and when you and I, we've known each other a little bit for maybe 2.5 years or so. Sean, you guys known each other for a much longer time, and when Sean came to me to tell me about this project and ask me to help a little bit, what he asked me to help was to close the door, to close the story. But the funny thing is that every single time he was telling me about it, I was new to it. So I was seeing that you were actually opening a door. You were, in your mind, you were closing a door, and you were telling me at each stage, oh, this is the last record. This is, we're going to have, as you said with Eugene, they want us to do a show, so this is going to be our last show. And in my mind, and remember what I was telling you, each time you were telling me this, I was telling you, don't say never. Don't say this is the end, because when you, even if you think this is your last gesture, it's still, you're putting something out to the world, and you don't know how the world is going to react. And that is going to have a greater effect on you than you on the world.
I mean, that's a credit though to Rob and Joey, and the record is personal with the Albini stuff, but it's also, there was some things that happened to Rob personally that I really felt, and I'll kind of let Rob sort of take this over, but that I felt that really, that I love Rob as my brother. Like him and we're pretty, I mean, Joey, you can see it. We're pretty inseparable. And I love Joey too. I love you, Joey.
I'm more of a footnote, though. It's okay.
But no. But I mean, the record is like super personal to both of us, but particularly to Rob, just kind of like certain things that there's subject matter in the record for sure, but also like stuff that happened even when we were finishing up the record, that made me really want to. I already was going to see it through, but after certain things happened, it really, kind of nailed home that like I need to see this through, not for myself, but for Joey, for Rob, for Jake, for Matt, for Ian, because they're important to this record and to this band, and I yeah, it's for them, you know what I mean? But I'll let Rob sort of take that part of it over.
Sure. I think what you're getting at is like the, oh geez, it just zoomed in on me. So the impetus of all of this, if we go back to 2013, Sean and I had found some demo recordings we had done in 2007. So then we can go back 2007. Sean and I were trying to do something. And at the time of my life, things were difficult. And I had to kind of like step away from music for like 5 years, which sucked. I didn't play shows. I wasn't writing music. I wasn't even like playing my instrument and stuff. And I kind of like disassociated for a little bit. But then my whole world came crashing down, and I had reconnected with Sean on these songs. And I think at the time we had called it Organ Level, but it's what became Demands. And
Yeah,
like
that's the first song.
we wrote that song back in 2007. And so we resurrect this and we're like, let's do something with this. And we started getting people together. And so like those earlier traumas informed how the band started. And I just really wanted to play again. Like I was just excited to play and to write and to get back out there. And we were doing that for years. And then the band imploded. There's trauma with that. And I really like I felt sad that these songs weren't heard. Like really, we were holding on to like what I thought were just great songs, and nobody had heard them, and they're just sitting on our computers and tape and shit. And that was why I was like, after years, I was like, Sean, we got to do this. We got to put it together, and we start getting it together, and we start resurrecting these songs, and we're like, let's do some overdubs. That's when we were like, Joey would be a great person to bring into this project to add something to it. We start doing this stuff. More tragedy happens. During the first overdub session, I got a phone call that my father was put into the hospital. So I had to end the session early. I was like ready to fly to Arizona to see him. Thankfully, he recovered at that time, but 3 weeks later, he didn't. So I kind of had to like step back for a moment. I couldn't go back into the studio to do overdubs right away, but I was like, I can't just let this sit again. So I grieved. I'm still grieving. I don't think you ever stop grieving, really. And I decided that I was going to put all my energy into finishing this, and as a tribute to my dad. I know it sounds cheesy as fuck, but it's true. And
there's nothing cheesy about genuine, like being real.
This is as real as it gets. I do dedicate the record to him, and there's a blurb in there that I wrote specifically for my dad, which has references to to Easy Rider, who he fucking loved. He's a motorcycle dude. So all of this like informs how personal the record is for us. And like my dad, before he died, I talked to him about doing this stuff and like going to Albini and bringing in like big guns, people that we always felt were kind of beyond our means. We're just a scrappy little punk band from Baltimore. Working with industry legends just seems out of place, and I just decided that like after my dad had passed, that I was going to see it through.
Wait, you forget one thing. You started a story. You told your dad that you wanted to do that, and what did he respond?
I did, yes. The last conversation I had with him before he died was that I was thinking about doing this and I wasn't sure. I was like, I don't know, this seems crazy. And he was like, Rob, you should do it. Like, you should just go for it, because this is it. Like, you might not have another opportunity to do it. And so you should just do it and not worry about it. And I thought about that, but it wasn't until that he passed that I finally was like, I should listen to what he said, the wisdom he was giving me at the time. And
but
I'm hoping
I have to say something though, because you make it sound, guys, like you're fanboys and you basically put some money on the side to buy yourself a hooker in a way. And Sean, you know me, like I wouldn't do this with you if I didn't genuinely think there's real value in what you're doing. And I think you're selling yourself short, because yeah, sure, everyone can open the checkbook and buy themselves someone they like. It's especially in the US culture. But I think that the result, what I heard before even the music was processed by not Steve but Bob Weston. It deserved it. It deserved it, and not just in terms of that you paid your dues. The music deserved it, and we deserve the music. Like, it's been a long process. Again, I know I insist on this. We live in political times, but besides that, it's well, you got a bunch of tracks that are in my book hits, which not everyone who does that kind of music has. It's easy. There's nothing. I mean, in a way, there's nothing easier than doing like a noise rock, punk rock album, but doing one that has something catchy that stays and that you can hear is coming from somewhere, not just like an accident. That's not everyone, and I think you have that. I'm not like saying that to. Well, I've got nothing to gain with that.
No, I think you're, I think that's a credit to Rob and to, I think, Rob and I's songwriting, and Jeff, who and Chris, who contributed, and Eric, the drummer, who contributed. I think, what makes this record, I think, and, going back to, Eugene was with us earlier. I went to Eugene and I was like, hey, I'm a fanboy of yours. Would you write anything about our record? And I thought he would, like he said, either say, hell no, I'm not doing that, or here's a sentence. You guys are a noise rock band. Have fun. And that it's still
he said
fine.
It already. He said it like 15 minutes ago now.
But like for him to actually, be really genuine, and I know it was how much he liked the record. And I know that the record's good, but to hear that from you, or to hear that from Eugene, it is kind of flattering, because I think, Rob and I and Joey, we've kind of lived this record. I mean, we know what these songs sound like, but to finally have it sort of come out and to hear people kind of talk about the record in ways that I could only like dream of, is really gratifying. And it, I think we were reaching for something more than just standard noise rock or grunge or whatever you want to call this record. I mean, I know, I know for Joey, it's not grunge. Joe, by the way, Joey,
it's steeped in it. You cannot avoid it.
Hates Nirvana.
But that's where all the hit making comes from, honestly. That's part of our DNA. There's just no getting around it. Like, we grew up on it. It's part of our DNA. I'm not going to deny it. Like, for a long while, I denied it, right? When I was like 25, 30 years ago, I would pretend, I don't listen to any of that stuff.
No, wait. Robbie, don't make people think that you're the devil. You're not 55 years old.
I think
I'm approaching 43.
Yeah, no, because you said 30 years ago when I was 25. So like, don't mislead.
Oh, I said 25/30 years ago.
Okay,
sorry.
But by the way, by the time this video is up, I think that hopefully you won't have to just trust us by our words, but I'll probably be able to put in the description of the video a Bandcamp link for the album. I hope. When is it coming out?
We do have one. Reptilian has it on their Bandcamp. You can pre-order it there.
It comes out, I think, May 30th.
May 30th, it releases officially. Yeah. You can hear Under, the current single that is out on Reptilian Records. I don't know if it's on streaming platforms yet. I think it's just on their Bandcamp, Under. Do you know, Sean?
I don't think it's on streaming yet, but I going back to like what Rob was saying, it's like, that was the other thing when we were like kind of constructing this band. Rob and I were very particular about we would talk about our influences. Like, that was the great thing about this band. Rob and I, we'd kind of wrote these songs, but we would also just like sit down and like listen to records and kind of go through what we liked and what we didn't like and how we wanted to be presented. And I think we took it very seriously. You know what I mean? Like the first, we were a band active from 2013 to 2019. And within those 6 years, we took it very seriously. I mean, it wasn't our full-time job, and we weren't expecting anything more than to sell maybe a couple of 100 7-inches. But we were very serious about what we were writing about and what we were doing. And so we would talk about influences, and Nirvana was as much of an influence to us as like DNA was, or, DNA was as much of an influence to us as like, even for me, like a power pop band like the Raspberries. Like, I think catchy songs are always a good thing. I think what makes our band, I hope, somewhat unique is that we can have these catchy songs, but then be like, oh, by the way, here's like the Hijakaiden side of us. You know what I mean? Or like the Masana side of us.
I think it's the other way around. I think that so the album that is coming out, there's a couple of dimensions with it, because you also have like a companion with covers of bands that have like more poppy songs, but the actual the proper album, I think, is the the Masona, when but in the sense that a lot of like early mid 90s noise rock that we all know, that sometimes we like it, sometimes we don't. Some of it I hate. Well, when I like stuff like Drive Like GU, for example, I can't stand that band personally, but that's yeah, I know. But you see, for me, when I
I
hear,
wouldn't consider them noise rock though. They were a post-hardcore band. So,
Yeah.
you're safe. You're
I
safe.
mean,
It's fine.
they have a song that opens with like what 4 minutes of feedback.
So
well,
doesn't make
again,
it.
you know what?
You a noise rock band. And we want to get into the theory.
Noise rock.
Rob,
I mean,
It's
Again,
rock
how do
with
you-
noise. It's not
Christian.
noise that rocks.
I am. I think like the one of the like the overarching ideas that way I approach writing is it needs to be memorable. And so there's going to be like catchiness, there's going to be hooks. If it's not memorable, like I'm not as interested in playing it or writing it. And so
what I'm
like,
going at, Rob, is that when you guys are talking about influences, when I listen to that album, I don't hear the influences. I can think about, oh, they must have been influenced by that, maybe, but it's not like what you're doing is not a pastiche of your influence at all. It is
Sean
its own
makes it
thing.
sound like it was very analytical, and like I was just trying to say, it really wasn't. Like it just came down to like, is this riff memorable? Like if I play this, are you gonna like hear it in your head an hour later? That's like how I approached it for most of it. I was like, does this sound cool? That's really it. And I wasn't
maybe that's
like,
like
oh, it's got to be like this kind of song, or it's got to be like that kind of song, or I want to bring in this kind of influence. So we're like, does this sound cool? And my influences just channel through subconsciously. Don't even think about it.
Maybe that's like but maybe that's like the dynamic. Like, you know, Rob's writing these riffs, and I'm sort of, Rob will come up with a riff, or I'll have a riff in my head, and Rob will work on it, or I'll tell Rob, oh, maybe we should change it this way. And like that side of it, Rob's right. I think, at least from my perspective, what I think makes the songs unique for me is that what can we do? And Rob and I have said this in other interviews. There's a lot of birth defect stuff that just never saw the light of day. Rob and I are very like, we're very meticulous about like, there's a certain standard of quality that we have, and if it's not up to snuff, it just goes out the window. And there have been songs that we worked on for weeks, and they just never materialized on records, not because we were too lazy to record them, but we kind of realized like, oh, that just is not up to our standards. So I think for me though, and I understand where Rob's coming from, but I think for me I was meticulous about like, well, let's, like, Rob's got this really catchy riff, let's keep that riff really catchy, but let's fuck it up in some way that like is just enough to be like, oh, there's something weird going on here. And a lot of that too is Rob's writing just in general. But there was times where we were like, Rob and I'd be like, well, how could we do this differently, or in just a way more fucked up way? And I think like when we brought Joey in to do the overdubs, that was kind of like, it was like, that was the zenith of like some of these songs where it's like, what could Joey do to like really, and I mean this as a compliment, not fuck up the songs, but add things to them that we just weren't even thinking about. And so there's a good chunk of songs on the record that would not sound the way that they do had Joey not been involved with these overdubs. And I mean that, really, really sincerely. And I think that Joey, you brought this up, a little bit ago, but the live unit really is a different monster from what's on the record. And part of that, though, there is part of that live unit on the record thanks to Joey. I think the record does seem a little more live with some of the overdubs that Joey did. But I think though the overarching point I'm trying to make is that like Rob's right. Like Rob plays very catchy music and I mean that in the best way possible, because these songs would just be shitty noise rock songs if Rob wasn't as particular as he was in terms of what is catchy and what's not, because I think both Joey, Rob, myself, we have no interest in like standard noise rock. We don't use noise as this crutch. We aren't just playing these riffs for fun. There is a thought process to this, and I it's an honor to work with the other musicians in the band. Seriously.
See, I had something to add to that, really, with the whole like. I really, Robert, like how you said it. I mean, I know you started saying catchy first, but then you started moving into describing it more as like memorable. And I think that like memorable doesn't have to be catchy, right? It doesn't have to be a hook that like, it doesn't have to be that earworm that you're at work and it just fucking hits you and you're like, God damn it, I cannot get this song out of my head. But like something like Swans, right? Where like you cannot forget Stay Here. That song is it's just like this pummeling, like, right? Like, or anything on Cop, right? Like Half-Life, that drum part is just like, it's not catchy, but the way it's done is so memorable that it sticks with you. And I think that's part of like that's something that I think Defects does very well, is they make things that are memorable. I say they, I guess I'm not part of the band. Rob's the one who wrote all the guitar shit. So something that Rob does really well is that Rob finds a way to make things that are ugly sound charming, sound inviting, almost. Like I can't think about it. Like we played another band together.
Joy, you increasingly sound like a Nirvana fan.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, guys. Yeah. But Rob and I did this other band, Crimson Baylet, which is super fast hardcore band. But like part of the reason I asked Rob to do it is because I didn't want people who were just going to write like, oh yeah, this riff sounds like Discharge. Cool, great. I fucking love Discharge, but like there's enough bands that sound like Discharge, right? Like Rob's playing style is, I mean, I haven't really played with anyone like him. The way he uses noise and in particular feedback, like in a way that is a part of the riff. Well, I guess we can talk about Twin Stumps before, right? Like Twin Stumps, that was something that they did. It was like they're on their self-titled record. I always joke about like the riff to feedback ratio on this record is like perfectly balanced, right? It's like 50-50. But that's something that Rob does really well, is takes that ugliness and integrate it into something that makes it memorable.
Well,
I think that's really it. Just I could go on and on and talk about like
there's that, but I think it's also to first, Rob. I think we're not ever gonna manage to kill that silly imposter syndrome that Sean seems to have, but at the same time, I think that's also the strength of it, in the sense that when I listen to the album, I think about production. Usually I don't care too much about that, but like I can't help but doing that, both in a positive way and also in a critical way, in the sense that I think Sean, even at your words, oh, let's bring Joey to fuck up the songs. You basically have this need to set the whole project to fail in a way. Oh, let's fuck up the songs. Oh, let's not tour. Let's not ever do live. Let's not do this. Like, but because Rob has this ability to to create this, like, you kind of give him a constraint that is very productive, I think. And that is a lot of
I think that's that. I mean, I make it very difficult to like, the band won't exist after June 13th, and a lot of that again. A lot,
maybe.
Well,
I don't know, man. If we get to play with High Rise, I'm saying yes.
That we may be playing some shows outside of the country at some point in 2026, but as far as America goes, we will cease to exist. But I think that constraint, and Christian, you would know this, especially with experimental music, can be a blessing and a curse, right? It's a curse because it is a constraint, but I think like sort of that idea of like, well, we've got X amount of time to do things. and it's got to be within this sort of time frame. Let's do it the best that we could possibly do it. The way that we've operated with this record since we finished mixing it last July was, all right, we're going to go 100 miles an hour. And some days it works great. Other days it is the worst thing in the world. And the last couple of weeks have been difficult, but I think especially after having some heart-to-hearts with Rob and just kind of like sort of realizing that like, oh yeah, like we're about to embark on a tour, which again, I really didn't, I genuinely didn't want to. And this label was very sort of, generous with their time and money. And I was like, well, I know what it's like to run a label. I don't want to, just say, oh, well, here's a record. We're not going to play any shows. Good luck promoting it. But it also gave me an excuse to hang out with Rob and Joey and Jake, and Ian and Matt and work with our buddy Terrence Hannum.
And to challenge yourself, even though
Sure.
in your case, we all understand it's a little bit different because of the disability.
Sure. I mean, but there's also a personal aspect to this record too. I mean, besides the stuff that happened with Albini and Rob's father, there's a lot of personal things on this record that are just, for both Rob and I, bring up, some really rough stuff until to step into that role again. Especially now that I'm in my 40s and, because the record really does sort of document, kind of the end of our 20s up to our late 30s. You know what I mean? This is sort of a loosely a document of that. And
that's your way of presenting it, and thankfully people can make their own version and history of that.
No, totally. But it is interesting to step into those songs and sing those songs, especially now that, I'm in my early 40s and what that perspective is and kind of having that sort of, I'm not that person anymore. So there is a little bit of a mind fuck to like go back to that. And like, cause I don't want to just sing the songs and be like, always under. Yeah. Like I have to be in that. I can't. And it would be, I wouldn't be able to do this if I was just doing it that way. So I really have to put myself in that mode again. And it is fucking hard. And, Joey and Rob, I think you guys can see it. Like we played our first show back. This is probably like 3 weeks ago at this point. And I remember at the end of that show, I was like, forget physically exhausted, because when you play a show, it's everything. But I was just like emotionally just like drained, and I hadn't felt that way in like a decade. You know what I mean? And so to go back there and to like, and it's not about being re-triggered or anything like that, because the album is loosely based on like people or myself who've been like liars, right? And not necessarily like, oh, there's no redemption arc here. What does lying and deceiving do to the person you deceived and the people around you? Like, how does that impact them? And there's no redemption. There's, somebody else told me, and they really liked the record, but they're like, and they meant this as a compliment. They're like, there's no joy in these songs. It's a very like joyless record. But it wasn't a diss, you know what I mean? Because like musically, they really, really like the record. And I thought that was a compliment, because that's kind of what some of my favorite records are, the most joyless. I mean, like Joey and I talk about Flipper all the fucking time. And like Generic, and Rob, I'm sure you agree, it's like, that is a fucking joyless record. And I mean that in like the best way. Like
Non-fiction is even bleaker.
Yeah.
Every time they say you ever look at a flower and hate it, I laugh so fucking hard.
I mean, the lyrics aren't the greatest, but I think idea, from musically too, it's just like you listen to that contextually, when it was recorded, and you're like, wow, like there's like no hope here. There's no redemption. There's no hope here. And those are the kind of records that are super interesting to me, when there's just no, there's no good ending. Those are the best kind of records.
Thankfully for me, not that like I disagree with your assessment of joy in music necessarily, but like since I don't have an emotional connection to the context, I see joy in some of the songs. Joy in the sense of excitement, that like was a lot of energy and musicality, like the song Macross again. Like for me, this is a song that brings joy. Maybe joy is also a relative term in a way, but like I'm just saying, like it's interesting to see. Sure, like to have like the behind the scenes thinking with you guys, but at the same time, the record is not yet out, but you all have released records before, so you know that as soon as the record is out, it's not yours anymore.
Yeah,
And
Exactly.
this story doesn't matter. It's
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I am hoping too, because like I do think there's a bit of a journey with the record, and we were very particular with how we sequenced it. In fact, we had like left a song from the recording session off because we just didn't think it fit that sort of journey. So like it's interesting when Sean says that, you know, he was told it was a joyless record. I could see that, but also like that's not how I feel about it. I definitely feel like it ebbs and flows, and the song order is a big part of like taking you through that journey. It starts in a particular place and ends in a particular place, but in the middle it's all over, you know?
Yeah, I mean, we were very particular too, and this is Terrence Hannum of Locrian and Holy Circle, which Rob is in a band with Terrence and his wife Erica. We've always been very particular about the art. If you look at our art, it isn't the standard noise rock affair. We don't do any of the like edgelord kind of artwork. It's very like I'm just speaking for me here. I am very, very pretentious, and you know this, Christian, with the art that I like. I'm very pretentious, and I just never wanted to do the sort of just like standard noise rock affairs, even though I like some of that stuff. And like there are certain bands that won't be named that have very distinct art styles that I love. And Joey, you know who I'm talking about. And
Right,
yeah, we'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, right there, right back there.
But like if you look at the record and the way that Rob and I and Terrence have kind of laid it out and the ideas of the record, there's a very nothing was left to chance. Everything was very, very, very meticulous. Now, what's great too about the tour stuff and some of the external things that we're doing, we do have a side of us that is a little more not as pretentious. This is where Joey comes into play, and like has really sort of, especially for the artwork for like the tour and stuff like that, has really sort of has added a little bit of brevity to the record. You know what I mean? In general, a little bit of humor that I think was not that we were missing, because I think Rob and I we have inside jokes and we're not humorless people, but I think like that was super, super needed because it is such a heavy record and there is a journey there. And so to have Joey help with artwork outside of the record, but we were very meticulous about the artwork. The artwork was, it was not an easy journey for that artwork. It was not cheap to do that artwork. And I'm very proud of it. Josh Sisk, who I've known since I was 18, 19, did the photography for the gatefold and the insert and the back cover and stuff. I mean, I've known him Rob and I have known him for 25 years.
Yeah.
That's how, so kind of like making this full circle, Christian, you were like, the connections of like underground music, experimental music, punk, almost everybody that's involved in this record, like Rob and I or Joey know, you know what I mean? On a personal level. And that's another reason why, like, when we were doing the record, like I wanted it to be with friends that I trust. There's not a lot of people in music that I trust. Rob could tell you, Joey could. There is, especially after this journey, there's less that I trust. But the two people I trust, in music, when it comes to like doing personal band stuff, is Joey and Rob. I mean, Rob is the only person in music that has never let me down. He's never let me down.
And you're probably right. At the same time, I would say it's probably the same experience of a lot of bands, in the sense that we do with what we have, and we choose within what we have access to. Yeah, but it's interesting, this like focus on the joyless. Like, now I'm gonna give an example. For me, since I think like most of the music I'm interested in has a cyclic component, be it music concrete to whatever. But one of the you made me think of what would be the most joyless music that I like, and the first thing that came to mind would be Godflesh,
Ooh,
in the sense that Godflesh, and it's the only metal music that I like, actually, and there's probably something to that as well, in the sense that there is a sort of like the martyr despair in their music that is so potent. Like, there is literally no joy in that music. There is ecstasy in a way, but like an ecstasy that on the precipice of death or whatever, without even the need of violence or brutality, even if it's there sometimes. So when I hear you talking about joyless, I guess it's also like maybe the difference in perspective from people from Northern America and people from Europe. Like, I guess there's something there, but that's just me babbling now.
I mean, I kind of agree a bit. Like, I think there's a lot of energy in the record. You know, like the opening tracks, like the first three have tons of energy. They're very driving, a lot of forward momentum with those songs. And then in the middle of the record, there's like some downer tracks. They're slower. They have like weird chords in them and stuff. And like it was to have a more like somber feeling on those songs, you know. And then you flip it over to the other side, and you have like, I don't know, Under is a very weird song, I think. Like, it doesn't follow traditional song structures. It does a bridge that like becomes its own like second song almost.
Sounds like
And
AFI.
yeah, Joey seems to think it sounds like AFI.
Actually,
just that bridge.
Not to interrupt, Robin, real quick. We're setting up for the overdubs, and I think Nick Skrobitz, the engineer, is playing Under. And the first thing out of Joey's mouth, they say, "Oh, yeah, that's the AFI part right here." And I'm like looking at Joey, like, "You're about to be on this record. Are you sure you even want to do this?"
Yeah, definitely don't agree with the AFI, but like, it's just that song. You know, I think it also like represents some of our most interesting songwriting, because it's pretty complex musically and we wrote it as a 5-piece. It's one of the few songs that were like written as a 5-piece when we had 5 people in the band in 2017, 18, 19. So, and like, you know, towards the end of the record, energy reappears. You have a song like Trap that is just like smack you in the face and leave you on the floor before you know it. And then ending with Throne, like that was kind of a hat tip to Cutthroat's 9, like one of our favorite records that Reptilian ever put out, Anger Management by them. That's a great record.
It's members of Unsane.
Yeah. And like that was kind of a little hat tip to them, because they were an influence. But like, again, it brings like, the record ends on this kind of like hardcore energy, but then the song just totally changes at the end. It becomes this like downer, drawn out, like fall apart destruction. So like,
just because I'm the host, I have to remind, like, sometimes you guys, you take the stuff that is so familiar for you, you take it for granted. Reptilian is a label that has put out a lot of great.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, I should put on my journalist hat and like do the explanations before I start dropping names and stuff. Yeah, Reptilian Records, Baltimore label. We've known Chris X runs the label. We've known him for a long time, and he's putting out the record. And I just mentioned a bunch of song names that were off the record too.
Yeah, and I know I know we've probably taken up a lot of your time, Christian, but I guess as we sort of like close this down, I think going back to why we brought Eugene in, in the original sort of first part of this conversation is we wanted to make a record that really was challenging, that was catchy, but that's what's great about like Oxbow, and the stuff that Eugene does. Like he has such a way of making these very abstract songs seem very approachable. And I'm not saying that our songs are super abstract by any means. We're not, but I think that the idea was, and it goes back to when Rob and I unearthed those demos and was like, all right, we're gonna start this band. When we would talk about the band, we wanted it to be a challenging band. I mean, the original idea, we wanted to do stuff like Drunks with Guns and other bands that do very like riffs for like 7 minutes, Rusted Shut riffs for like 7-8 minutes, these slow prodding things. And then we played around with that, but then we kind of like hit on this idea of like we could add elements of that, but then really make these songs memorable, or catchy or whatever you want to call them.
You say Rusted Shut's not memorable?
Well, memorable for other ways, heroin use, probably,
Track on stage, yeah.
But
it's funny you say that, because you might hate it, but like the other day I had to describe your music to someone who had never heard it, and I described it as a sort of kind of the perfect middle between Pavement and Unsane.
That's wow. That is a description that you can make if you like.
Let's go Pixies over Pavement.
Yeah,
over anything.
You're talking about that first Pavement record?
Oh yeah. No, but because like there's the slacker aspect of it, but then there's also the grimness and the sort of like machine, like the sort of death machine at the same time, which is the opposite of Pavement, but at the same time to have both these energies at the same time. That's what appealed to me at first when I heard when you sent it to me, and you were like, you're probably not gonna like it, and like, so I looked for what to like in it, and it was so easy to find that sort of contrast between something.
I think the thing is like this beyond the Nirvana stuff. When I'm speaking for Robin here, I think we all come from punk, very degrees, and I think that like just for me, punk for me is about not having any of those limits, right? Like I could listen to like fucking Void, and then listen to like Albert Eiler, and then listen to like Super Drag or like whatever pop bullshit that I like, and I think the idea of and I think that balancing those and having that sort of high and low brow is really challenging. And I love to, like, when I am listening to records, I'll listen to a Music Concrete record, and then I'll listen to a free jazz record, and then I'll put on fucking Yes, just because it's like super But I think that like that's to me that is for me, that's punk. Like there are like when Rob and I really kind of started to become friendly, we would trade ideas about punk, and Rob had a very distinct way about listening to punk, and I sort of hey Katie, I sort of broke Rob down in time.
You can eat without me.
I don't. The food's down here, babe.
I didn't take it. You've already come in. Come on, take the food.
Anyway, so what I'm getting at is Rob was very super punk, and I think I broke Rob down a little bit as we got to know each other, and then for both of us, punk just became this like, well, you just do whatever the fuck you want. You just listen to whatever you want, and it's as long as it's got like something. If it's got heart to it, this is a Kurt Cobain quote. If it's got heart,
don't fucking say it.
Like
don't say it.
Like,
no, what he says is, as long as it's good and it has passion. That's the quote.
Yeah, there you go. So
you play it as sloppy as you want, as loud as you want, as long as it's good as it has passion.
Yeah, but you're missing an element.
That's on a Page 99 record too. Which one is that? Document 7, I think.
It's 8, and I know this because I owned it and I gave it away. Because I realized that Page 99 is just Converge for dudes who like to manipulate their girlfriends instead of punching drywall.
Oh my god! Oh,
whoa!
But I want to say though then that like recently
Shots fired.
there was a discussion about like what younger people listen to and what older people listen to, and gatekeeping, and like that we should embrace what young people listen to, blah blah blah. All this like sort of reverse and back and forth judgmental thing. But I was thinking like the kind of obvious thing that is rooted in what you're talking about, like you were saying punk, and like for me, like of course, like for me punk is British or European, and what you have in America, because you're Americans, you have punk rock, but that's besides the point. The thing is that there is, yeah, sure, you do whatever the fuck you want, but it's not just in a vacuum. It is, you do whatever the fuck you want against expectations, and that's important, and that's why it is political.
I think that's a good way to tie everything. Well, go ahead, Joey. It's either you're.
I would say I gotta go because it's dinner time and I have not eaten yet. So
Well, no, I was getting ready to say that's a good way to tie everything up.
Yes.
It sounds like Rob, you need to go eat dinner, and Joey, you need to go eat dinner, and you know,
Sorry for the
I could sit here and talk about punk and Nirvana and all that stuff all day, but I will
And
end with this.
we will, but in another episode, because here it's like almost 2 o'clock in the morning. And
I was just saying, I was like, you're 6 hours.
Oh my
like,
God,
ahead of us, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I just want to
It's
like
so sweet.
say, you know, Stunty, Christian, thank you for
Stunty.
hosting us. And thank you to Eugene for the kind words and jumping on here early on, and it really means a lot to us. And I'm very proud of this record. I think we all are very proud of this record, and I think what the kind words that you've said and Eugene said, what it really shows is that this album was a journey, and it still is. We're not finished, and I'm very happy to take this journey, even though sometimes it sucks. With the people that are here on this call, I'm excited to see what others think of this record, and I'm proud of the work that we all put into it. So
I will say that though.
At the end of the day, the real birth defects were the friends we made along the way.
There you go.
There you go. Yeah, that's a good way to you're ready to be how do you say the guy, a ghost writer for
right, someone's biography. Yeah.
All right.
Well, on that note, all right, Christian, Joey,
everyone,
Rob,
thank you.
I'll put the links of Eugene's latest projects, Buñuel.
Oh yeah, thank you,
in
Eugene.
the description, so you can go and listen to this and the birth defects. And if anyone have, I hope you enjoyed the conversation. At first, it was sort of like a discussion between you guys, and I tried to moderate. Since Eugene left, we fell back to our usual like stream of consciousness discussion, which I was happy to include Joey. And if anyone wants to further the discussion, I'm sure the guys will be reading the comments. If you have any questions, that they will be engaging if they don't want to be too negative about it all, as they usually are. And
don't be negative.
Yeah,
negativity is great. And with that, I'm going.
All right.
Boyd Rice.
Thank
you.
Bye. See ya. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.